Hello coders. In this video, we are going to discuss about licensing SharePoint setup. As we know, SharePoint involves a lot of different components and hence the licensing of those components can be very difficult, and sometimes to be compliant you need to take care of a lot of different things. Hence, this video will help you grasp some of the terminologies and identify the do's and don'ts that you need to take care while purchasing SharePoint licenses and related softwares associated with it. So, welcome back to Help Me Coder, the channel which talks about technology and helps the coder community out there. So welcome back to SharePoint licensing on Help Me Coder. So do remember to like and subscribe our channel. Now coming for the agenda of today, we will start with basics of SharePoint licensing, and here we will be discussing about enterprise licensing model and the standard licensing model, plus the client access licenses or the CAL. We will be discussing about what is this user CAL or the device CAL. Then also we'll look into the on-premises and the cloud licensing model. Where then coming to licensing scenarios, we will discuss about your how you set up your topology, or how do you want to set up an intranet setup, or you want to have an internet or an extranet setup. What are the differences on the licensing part over there? Then we will look into the software assurance. What are the benefits, or should we go with software assurance or not? Then we look into the various pane licensing areas, which is like how do you track a license. So tracking a license is one of the pane area for any SharePoint team. Now then we look into the budgeting a license. How do you budget out licenses? What are the different components you need to take care while budgeting for your SharePoint farm? Lastly, we will be looking into overall picture uh, of the licensing model. So we will look into some examples of setting up when you set up a on-premises small farm or a medium farm. So what are the different cost factors that you need to look into? So we will do a run-up with some examples for the small farm and the medium farm. Now, coming back to the basics of SharePoint licensing, this works on client-server licensing model. What we mean by that is you need to procure a SharePoint server license for your server, and then for each and every user you need to purchase a equivalent client license or the CAL license. For the server part, you basically need a standard or an enterprise CAL. So for SharePoint server with a standard CAL, you get basic core capability stack for SharePoint, and for enterprise you will get a full functionality stack for SharePoint. What we mean over here with this enterprise CAL is that you get to have business solutions like access services, info path services, which are not part of your standard CAL license. So with business intelligence, we get Power View, Performance Point services, Excel services, and Visual services. So enterprise CAL is a full capability stack for SharePoint, while your standard CAL is the core capability area of SharePoint. You need to decide as an organization whether your work can be accomplished with your standard CAL. So most of the organization works with just the standard CAL, and that's more than enough for them. But for some organization, they want to do some business intelligence, some AI, or some business solutions like access services, infopath. So they do need enterprise scale for those kind of capabilities. So this is one thing that you need to decide. Coming back to user cal and device cal. So when we talk about user cal, we mean that one user can access multiple devices, and he can use the same SharePoint. You can access the same SharePoint site on his handheld device, on his laptop, and he can even travel back to home, and then he can access his home laptop to access the server. So user cal is basically useful for companies where employee needs to have a roaming access to the corporate network, while device cal is single device with multiple users. So maybe in your organization you have night shifts, so there are some users who are coming at night and then trying to access the SharePoint at night. So then you don't need to procure two licenses for by user cal. You can easily get one device cal, and then there are different users can access the SharePoint using the same device. So on those scenarios you will require a device cal. So it is ideal for companies with multiple users for one device. Now coming to on-premises versus cloud. On premises, as we know, when you the all the things that we have discussed till now, like the client access license and your server licenses, which is required for each running instance of your SharePoint. So on premises you need to take care of client server licenses, which are like your cal and your standard or enterprise licensing for your SharePoint. When we talk about cloud, basically we have some basic plans that Microsoft has come up with, and you can choose those plans, and you can pay per user on a month and a per month basis. So those plans are like $10 per month or something like that. So you can purchase a standalone plans for SharePoint specifically, or you can buy an Office 365 plan. So if your organization, for example, doesn't have Office right now, and then you are setting it up for, and then you can buy basically an Office 365 plan, which comes with your Outlook and everything, and then it comes with your SharePoint as well. So the whole package is bundled together. Or if you just need SharePoint, you can even go with a standalone plan. To show you all those plans, basically you can see it over here. So if you see, I have provided the links basically on the comment section of this video. You can go and access those links as well. Now if you see Office 365 plans, so these are the different Office 365 plans, like business, enterprise, education, government, and Office 365 Germany. So when you go and buy these plans, so it looks like this. So if for an Office 365 plan, you get these things, Office applications like Outlook, Word, Excel, PowerPoint, OneNote, and all those things. So it doesn't have SharePoint right now. So, but this one, Office 365 Business Premium, it does comes with your Yammer, Exchange, OneDrive, SharePoint, Skype, all those different things. Now, if I show you the standalone plan, so this is a SharePoint online standalone plan. So um, this is for the SharePoint. So this is for the standard features, the core capabilities features. This one is online plan 2, which is feature capabilities for enterprise stack. So it comes with SharePoint and OneDrive only. So it has enterprise capabilities. So it will contain all the capabilities that you have over here in online plan 1, and it will have the enterprise capability of its own on plan 2. So this is the difference between the standalone and then the Office 365, which is this one. I have provided the links below. You can go and have a look in those. So after looking into the basics of SharePoint licensing and the terminologies, we will look into some different licensing scenarios, like your intranet, extranet, or internet setup. In intranet setup, which basically means within your organization your employees will access SharePoint. So uh, people outside the organization cannot access that setup, so it's behind a firewall. For this kind of setup, you will, based on number of users in your organization, you will procure that many cal licenses. Or if you are working with a device cal, then number of devices that are connected to SharePoint, that many device cals needs to be procured. For SharePoint server specific license, you will based on your per running instance of the software, you will procure that many server licenses. When we look into SP 2010, SP 2013, and SP 2016, the licensing pattern is almost the same. Means if you have to buy the SharePoint license for each running instance of the software. So if you, for example, in a two-tier architecture where you have front-end server and then you have a database server only, so you will buy only one SharePoint server license. While if you have a three-tier architecture where you have a front end and then you have application and the service setup in the middle and then you have a database, then you will buy two server licenses. So based on number of instances, you need to procure that many uh, server licenses. So this concept is still the same between all these three SharePoint versions. The difference in 2016 is that now you have a min role concept. So what min role means is that you need to, when you run your central admin, you need to specify there like which role this server will be working on. So if I show you what min role means is so there are like 8 predefined server roles in 3 different categories. So you can choose from. So they're like front end, application, distributed cache, and search. Then you have a shared role where you have front end with distributed cache and application with search. Then third category was a special role where you have single server farm and custom. Now how does that looks like is this is the configuration wizard, and it will have all these 3 different categories over here. What does these role mean is when you install SharePoint on a server, you will need to tell that what this machine will basically do. So if you say that it is a front end, you will choose front end, so no other services uh, can be started on this particular uh, machine. So only this will become as your front end and if so so if you choose it as a search, it will become a search. So initially when SharePoint 2016 came in, they had only these dedicated roles over there. So after a lot of people complained about that because of this their number of servers will be increased, because if you have only dedicated roles, then you will need at least one front end and one application and one search, so 3 servers in all just for SharePoint, and then one database will be a separate one, so 4 servers. So after much of concerns raised by people, Microsoft has come up with a shared role. Now one server can have front end with distributed cache. So what this means that your front end will also have a distributed cache and it will act as a front end. Plus if you want the application with search will be your second server. So at least you will need a 3 tier where you will have one as a front end with distributed cache, and then other with the application with search, and third will be your database. Now there is one more category, the single server farm. The single server farm is for the development purposes. So if you want to have a standalone or single setup, so you can choose the single server farm. There is also one more option which is custom, which is like which takes you back to SharePoint 2013 stage, where you choose your services and choose which all services will run on your machine. So from licensing point of view, you this may require you at least two SharePoint server, one with the front end with distributed cache role and one with an application with a search role, and third will be your database server. So at least two SharePoint server standard or enterprise editions may be required with this approach. Now coming back to other changes, SharePoint 2016 also will not support having its database as Express or free Express edition. So you will need to buy a licensed version of SQL Server. So that's one change. The other change is that there is no free foundation for SharePoint 2016. So it only comes in 2 flavors, which is standard and enterprise. So Microsoft is stopping many of the free things with your SharePoint, which earlier basically you can set up on SP 2010 Foundation Edition, and then you can use your Express SQL Server. So two license you straight away you will save. But now with 2016, this is not possible. Now coming back to the next setup, which is the internet setup. In internet setup, basically, which means that you have a company and you have exposed the content out to the public, so it's a public facing website. So the content basically is accessible within your company, and it is accessible to the contractors, to your clients everywhere, and to everyone basically on the world wide web. Now the licensing model is different between 2010, and ideally the little bit same on 2013 and 16 side. So 2010 used to come up with a SharePoint server for internet site standard or enterprise edition. So that was a separate different license. But with 2013 and 2016, they have streamlined things between the intranet and internet cases. What they have done is the licensing pattern is same. So you still buy that SharePoint server 2013 based on per running instance of your software, and depending upon the nature of use, you will be buying cal or you will not be buying cal. So in intranet you used to buy cal, but with internet setup you don't require to purchase cal. But there is a glitch over here. The glitch is that if your content, that is your content exposed on internet, is a public content which is accessible by everyone, and then your employees are also accessing same, then you the employee doesn't require cal license. But if there is a content which is on your internet website and it is secured, means it has some permissions, and that is accessible, that your employees are trying to access, then they will do require the cal license. Now coming to the extranet setup. So extranet setup is a basically a mix of both internet and intranet setup. The use of it is that if you want to collaborate with your contractors and you still want to have some kind of authentication mechanism between you and your contractor, it's not a public oriented content, then you need to use this extranet setup kind of uh, scenario. So in this scenario, what we do basically is, for SharePoint 2010 you can follow two different paths. Either you can buy a intranet kind of a licensing for server, which is like SharePoint Server 2010 license, or you can buy the SharePoint server for internet sites standard or enterprise edition, which is the internet specific license. If you go for the intranet path, then you, for both internet internal and external user, you need to buy the cal licenses. But if you follow with the SharePoint server for internet sites standard or enterprise, then you need to buy CAS for the internal users, because they will be using the authenticated sections of the site. But for the external users, you still don't need to buy the cal. So the idea during SP 2010 days was that if you have lot of external users who are using your or accessing your authenticated content of your site, then you go with the second approach. You buy the SharePoint server for internal internet sites or enterprise edition. You don't go with the SharePoint server 2010 license, because then you have to buy cals for each and every external or internal users. But with 2013 and 2016, things were very straightforward. You don't have the internet part of licensing, you only have the SharePoint server 2013 license, which is either enterprise or standard edition. So it was pretty straight licensing in 2013 and 2016. But for the licensing part, uh, for the cal, for internal users you still require cals, because now they are using authenticated part, authenticated access. For external users you don't require cal, so that's same for 2013 and 2016. So this is the extranet setup. This brings us to the next topic, which is software assurance. So software assurance is basically aimed for the business users who use Microsoft Windows servers, Office, and desktop applications. So what they do provide is that they provide you the ability to spread your payments over several years. So even in those years, if there is a new upgrade for SharePoint, they or new upgrade for any of those softwares for which you have purchased software assurance, they will provide you free upgrade. um, Other than that, there are many other benefits. One other benefit that I want to point out over here is that they provide passive secondary instance for your SQL server. So which I liked it, because you don't have to buy you need to purchase license for your secondary SQL server. So you can, for your passive, which is SQL server, you can use the same license as your main SQL server, so you can use the same license. Now the question is, do you have the product roadmap, or why do you need a software assurance? So if you need a software assurance, and if you are upgrading your server every 2 years or 3 years, you are a technology oriented company and you are upgrading it like that, means as soon as a new product comes in, you go back to the new version that comes in, then it makes sense for you to buy the software assurance, because purchasing those products as soon as they get launched, we can be a quite a costly affair for your organization. But if you are, if you don't feel that you will change your product every now and then, like within 3 or 4 years, then I don't think so that will be that will be making any financial sense for your organization. So there are the other products that comes with software assurance. Other features that comes with software assurance are, I can show you over here, are these. So I have provided the link and necessary instructions on the comment section below. You can go ahead and have a look on those links. So what are the other advantages of software assurance? Like what they say is that you get to know, you are provided with e-learning, 24-hour 24/7 problem resolution support, software assurance basic, and then what else? So you get training vouchers, enhanced edition benefits, new product version I've already spoken of, Microsoft desktop optimization pack. But it all point to, for me, the major catch is, I upgrading my software within 3 to 4 years? If not, I don't look into the software assurance part. But it depends upon company to company. Means I rest this to you to decide on whether you require software assurance or not. After the software assurance, there is one new product that they have launched, which is called premium assurance. Now this premium assurance is on top of software assurance, so you need to have software assurance first, then only you can buy this premium assurance. So premium assurance is that it extends your product for, or it gives extended life for 6 more years. So if you have Windows Server 2008 and you have premium support for that, you can extend it for 6 more years, so you have first the normal support, then you have extended support, and then you have premium support. So you can basically run your server for, I would say, 16 years now. So that's, so they will keep on providing you patching and some mission critical upgrades on those things. But this is only for Windows Server and SQL Server, so not for all the products. So but just keep in mind that premium assurance is an SA add-on, means you need to have software assurance to get a premium assurance. So you need to purchase first software assurance, then you need to purchase premium assurance. So this is about software assurance. Now licensing pain areas. On this slide, we will discuss on how to track the licenses. So tracking a license has been always a pain area for any SharePoint license company. So whenever there is an audit, internal or external, they need to find out how many licenses are being used, and there is no easy way to find out until SharePoint 2013 or 16. In SharePoint 2010, there was no easy way to find out. It was on a trust basis. So you need to keep your licenses correctly managed. If you get audited by Microsoft, then if they found any discrepancies between your licenses, then you can be penalized. But then with 2013 and 2016, to manage them has become little bit easier. So what has been done on this thing is that on your PowerShell, you don't have a user interface right now. You can just use any PowerShell command line to enforce this licensing or enable this licensing check. So how we do this is on the Active Directory you create some groups, and then you add those users part of that AD group, and then with your PowerShell command attach that AD group to that licensing or you map that AD group to this licensing group. So there are basically 5 licensing levels in SharePoint 2013 and 16, which are like standard, enterprise, project, dude, and WAC. Now for us SharePoint, we only need to concentrate majorly on standard and enterprise. So if for example in your organization you have 30 enterprise license, and then you want to track those 30 enterprise license, what you can do is you can create one AD group, add those 30 users inside that AD group, and then you need to enable first the management of the licensing using PowerShell. By default, it is disabled in SharePoint 2013, so you can enable it by enable/sp user licensing. Once enabled, then you can add this group, the security group, to whatever licensing mapping terms that we have over here. So you can say something like this. So this is a variable standard licensing group is equal to new sp user licensing mapping. Security group is this is Contoso standard cal. So this is a group of in the AD, and then you say select colon license, and it is a standard, so it's getting mapped to standard license. So all the users part of this group will have a standard license. So if any user who is not part of this particular group will not be able to access SharePoint because it doesn't falls under the standard group. Now then you add sp user licensing mapping slash mapping, and then this variable for enterprise. So if you have an enterprise, you just do the same thing. You have the same command, but then the last you need to just change it to slash licensing enterprise. So that's a very important feature that has been enabled on SharePoint 2013 and 2016. It was really very hard to manage licensing on earlier versions of SharePoint. So this was one of the pain area. Uh, the other pain areas for licensing is the budgeting part. Now there are so many components in SharePoint that budgeting different components become very difficult. Like budget factor depends on various components, like whether you are going for on-premises or cloud, whether your setup type is an intranet, extranet, or internet, whether your architecture is a 2 tier, 3 tier, whether you have fault tolerance on your system. Uh, Other than that, what are the OS installed, what is the SQL Server installed, what is the hardware installed, with which version you are running on SharePoint 2010, 2013, 2016. How many cals do you require, whether you require standard cals, enterprise cal, whether you require a user cal, device cal. So there are so many components to look after when you go for budgeting for license. So these all components, I have covered some of the components in my earlier uh, slides, but in the next slides, I will be showing you how the prices are calculated for all these components, and we will be taking into small farm and a medium farm into consideration. Now, coming to software pricing estimate for the small farm. So these are the price estimates that I have got the information from various different Microsoft sites. So these prices may change and vary, so they shouldn't be taken as it is for your budgetary quotations. It is just for your reference, so as you get an understanding on how the pricings are working over here. Also, these are on USD, and different places may have different prices, so please do check back uh, the prices with Microsoft. uh, Now some assumptions over here. I'm this for small farm, which is likely for 500 users. I'm using SharePoint 2016 over here. So this is a web server plus app server, everything included, so one single machine. So it's a custom made machine, so custom machine. So it's, and then we have a database. So this custom machine, 24 gig of RAM, 4 core, 16 GB of a database, and then 4 core processor over here. What our prices are not included, like hardware price, so we have not calculated the price of these hardware. Fault tolerance is not part of this price. Then professional services of setting up this is not part of the price. Backup systems not part of this price. So many of the things are still not part of this price, so the cost will be even more than this. Now SharePoint server licensing. So when we come to SharePoint server licensing, over here is one box, so one SharePoint server licensing. Approximately for standard license it is like 4,700, so it may change, it may be like 4,500 to 5,000 USD. So I just took a middle figure, 4,700 USD. CAL licenses for standard license, so if there are 500 user, you need to buy 500 CAL licenses, so it's approximately like 85 USD. So it totals up to 42,500 USD. Now SQL Server 2016 core base, we have client server based license as well for SQL Server 2016, but I will mention that you need to go with the core based license. The reason being that, let me show you one example on this one. So if I show you this example, so these are the models. So you have server plus CAL license and you have a core based license. So for core based license you need to purchase a minimum of 4 cores on your server. So whether or not you use, that's a different story, but you need to buy at least 4 cores, uh, at least 4 cores for your server. Now the difference between server plus CAL and the core base is, because in a SharePoint specific environment you don't want to end up purchasing CAL licenses for your SQL server for each and every employee in your organization, correct? So it's advisable to, that's why, buy a core based license. Because if you see this diagram over here, so if I can increase it over here, so this one is a user-based license. So there are 3 users inside an organization and there are 2 servers. So basically for 2 servers, there are 2 server licenses over here. It doesn't matter on how many cores over here they have. So they have 2 server licenses and then they have 3 client access license, or the CAL licenses. Now the difference between core base is, now they have 3 VMs over here, or virtual cores. One is having 2, other is having 4, and the third one is having 6. So the total licenses that they need to purchase is for, even if you have 2, basically mind it, even if you have 2 you need to purchase for 4, and then for 4 you have 4 and 6 and 6, so you have to purchase 6, 4, 10 and 4, 14 core licenses. So there is a minimum of 4, and so now in this part, basically if you have 4,000 users in your organization, then you don't need to buy licenses like over here 4,000 client access licenses. So it's only that 14 uh, core licenses that you need to purchase. So I have provided the full this PDF and all other details about this SQL Server licensing. Also, one point to note over here is you need to choose the SQL Server licensing, whether you need an enterprise edition or you need a standard edition. Mostly for our case, for if you are going for SharePoint standard edition, then definitely you will go for the standard edition for SQL, until unless there is a case for that. But usually you will go for standard edition. So uh, and Express edition you cannot use it with SharePoint 2016, so that's anyhow out of the question. If I go back to my PPT, so we have SQL Server 2016 core base. So we purchase 4 cores over here, which will cost you around 7,200 USD. So we add it up over here. Then operating system Windows Server 2016. So again, this is a core base. Minimum cores 16 are required. So you need to know, you need to have at least 16 cores. So it's like 850 USD. But over here we will require 2 OS Windows Server 2016, one for the Web Plus app server and one for the database. So that's why 2 into 850 is equal to 1700 USD. Now, coming to the medium farm, now we have one web server, one app server, and one database over here. So web server and app server, they both have 16 GB of RAM and 4 core processor, plus database have a 16 GB of RAM and 4 core. This setup can support up to like 5,000 users over here, and SharePoint 2016 is installed on the web and the app server. Prices not included are hardware, fault tolerance, professional services, and backup. For SharePoint server licenses, we will need two quantities over here, because for one for web server and one for app server. So that's why 4,700 into 2. And for CAL licenses, we have 5,000 users, so approximately 5,000 into 85 USD per license for standard. So this is the cost. And SQL Server 2016 core based. So this one is core based. Still, we require only one for database. So this one will be standard edition 2016. For 4 cores, minimum purchase 4 cores, we need 7,200 USD, which is this one. Operating system, that's also core based. So for 16 cores, we need 3 OS. So 850 into 3 is equal to 1700 USD. So this is how the medium farm will be set up. Then sky's the limit, you can go for the large farms. So this brings us to the end of the SharePoint licensing video. Thanks for watching. Do subscribe and like our video, and provide your comments and feedback on how you have faced issues with SharePoint licensing and how you have overcome that. If you have any comment about the video, we are more than welcome to hear that. Thank you once again. Happy coding.